Okay, welcome back to Legal Talk. I am speaking with Abigale Stolfe, or Abby as I've been calling her. Uh, and we've been having a great conversation about all things family law because family law is not just divorces, it's not just the child support. It really is the next chapter, looking forward, dealing with what is the current situation, but really going forward. And one of the things that I have been finding, and we've been talking about a little bit, is that traditional husband, wife, 2.5 kids, white picket fence is not necessarily the norm nowadays. We have what I coin as the modern family, the family that is, say, like Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. They live together, have beautiful families, but never marry. How do you, when you have a couple, say you have a couple that comes to you and say, we're not getting married. We own a house together, we have children, um, we want to do investments and such. How do you counsel that modern couple or modern family in preparing themselves for any circumstances that may arise in the future?
That's a great question because that is definitely more prevalent now than we have seen, well, really in the last like 20, 30 years, right? This is all kind of a new phase where we're going. So when I do talk to whether it's a young couple or a second time arounder, what I like to talk about is what is the expectation and what are the challenges and what are the things that we need to hit that you two maybe have not been able to hit. So it's very simple to say, oh, we decided to buy a house together. That's great. How are we dealing with the deed? How are we dealing with the disproportionate down payment? How are we dealing with what happens if we need to sell the house? Who's deciding if we sell the house? Take it a little further. We have a lot of millennial couples now who want that traditional family, the trad wife trend, the stay-at-home trend, but they don't want to get married. Well, then they don't get alimony. So how are we dealing with the loss of career, the loss of income opportunity, growth in advancement if you're staying at home? Because now in 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, you're not going to get alimony. And in many states, you're also not going to get palimony without a written agreement. So this would be the writing that would say, well, if we're going to have children, what's the plan? And who's going to take on what responsibility? And if one of us loses our job, what's the plan? And who's going to take on what responsibility? Because for people like Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, there's plenty to go around. We all assume, right? That's our view, at least from the outside in. But in a millennial family who's just starting out at 28, 29, 30, 31, they're not. They're just starting out. So everything is light. The retirement account's light, savings account light. We need to be planning for what happens in those, what we know to be life adventures, what we know to be life realities, because we've all experienced one of those hurdles at some point. Well, they don't really know what to do or expect with that. And what we need to do is set them up for success, even if they're choosing not to get married. And in most of the states, there's no success if you choose not to get married. So we need to figure out how to make that happen by agreement while everyone is still working towards the common goal. So I myself have been doing a lot of marketing and advertising and education. I speak about this a lot. I was at a wedding event the other week, and I was talking about cohabitation agreements, and I'm like, forget prenups. This is for the people who are choosing not to get married. So because some people in our area, particularly, we have an Orthodox community. Many Orthodox people do not get married in the secular world. So the alimony laws don't apply, the equitable distribution laws don't apply because it's a religious marriage only. So these are the realities, at least where I'm practicing, and I practice within the Orthodox community. Now, they have a tradition that goes way farther than anything we've done that addresses this in their premarital agreements. But that's kind of the adoption, is this cohabitation agreement. And I think that that is really where family law and estate law is going, because, you practice estate law.
Mhm.
I know of estate law. I don't necessarily make it a primary practice, but there are no benefits to those who are your cohabitant.
Oh no, I talk, trust me, I'm, divorced. I'm a second, I guess what you call a second termer, living with my boyfriend. And I actually raised this to him the other day because we discussed it, and he's a widower. So it's like that always interesting too. For those of you, a little probably too much personal information, but it's an interesting point in that I tell him, you know, I have no protections whatsoever via the law. What I'm like, if something were to happen to you right now, your son can come in and say, hit the road, Jack, you know? Um, and in the stage that I am of my adventure of a life, I want those assurances. So the cohabitation agreement, because it's just like you said, the prenuptial agreement is great, which I have been finding more younger couples have been wanting those. And it's a great way of defining what your rights are. And thing, but the cohabitation, and now I'm going to be bringing this up to him again, because I do want, what happens, say you're a second termer, you have to consider what happens if you become disabled,
Right.
Or something happens to your business, or, we all lived through that great recession when the bubble burst and such. But so just, and I love how you massage it. So in these cohabitation agreements, because I am taking notes for personal use, I'm telling you, Abby,
Well,
if I
hopefully this is informative to everyone. So
I hope so too. Look, I'm one of those that if it's informative to me, people, you should be writing down notes. I'm a note taker. I actually have my notepad right here too. But when you're working with someone in this cohabitation agreement, and they are now, let's just say it's a second termer, as you put it, somebody who's like, okay, we've done there, been there, we don't want to get married, but we are commingling, we are putting together our assets or buying new assets together. How would you go about structuring this type of understanding, even for future support, if something were to happen within that relationship?
yeah, so that's a great question, because that is something we see a lot in second termers. The first go around, you are pretty much on equal footing as far as what your assets are that you're bringing into the relationship. The second timers, not so much. There is some disproportionality to, I don't know if that's a word, but we're going to make it one, disproportionality to what they're bringing to the table. So what I like to do is I like to ask first, do we have children that are not in common that we still want to care for? Take what you've explained to your family. You may say, well, my stepson is basically, in my view, my son, and therefore anything I have, he's going to have. That makes it a little easier, right? Now we can say it doesn't matter who put what in, because you guys are really melding your whole pot, and that's a little bit easier. So we don't have to necessarily address deed allocations and percentages and what goes back to one person or another. But in those cases where, let's say you didn't have that feeling and your boyfriend came in with a child and you came in with a different child, and he's putting 500,000 into your 1.5 home, and you're putting 100,000 into your 1.5 home, and then you're going to mortgage the rest. Well, that's very disproportionate when you're talking about the children, right? If something were to happen to the two of you, first and foremost is, does his son get the benefit of the 500,000, or does your daughter get the benefit of the 100,000, or are we going to pretend that didn't exist? So a lot of times what I'll say is, in these agreements, that the deed has to reflect the investment. So we're not going to do joint with right of survivorship. We're going to do joint in common at, in this case, man at, 50% and wife at, or whatever the percent, 90 and 10, whatever the percentages come out to, right? So we would do it that way. Another way to handle that is we can say, well, we're going to do a 90-10 deed, but we don't want Alina moving in her 80s, because that's not right. So we might build into a cohabitation agreement a life term, not a life estate. We all know that there's some issues with that. So we build in a life term. And so that we can't get kicked out by the kids. But then we might say, well, how's she going to pay for it? We got another issue there. And we can't get life insurance because it's too late for life insurance. It's too cost prohibitive. So we might build in a trust that's to be funded by the child of the deceased, so that if something were to happen, that child would get the money back. It wouldn't automatically revert to the state. So there's a lot of, when you're talking about second time arounders, we do have to deal a lot with estate attorneys as well, because we want to make sure that our language is going to pass muster, and we want to make sure that our estate planning for the purposes of trusts, etc., is going to meet our intention. So in that context, a cohabitation agreement needs to be very thoughtful. It is not a quick, we're in love, sparkles and unicorns agreement. It's a, what are we doing for real with our lives and our money and our families?
I'm sorry, I'm cracking up. Okay, nothing
Sparkles and
against
unicorns.
unicorns and sparkles. We all love them. No, but I understand, and it is. And I think that it is so important to educate and empower our clients. And that right there, I mean, just that little bit of explanation really truly does empower, but it also stabilizes the family, because what I call, that blended family, which is more and more the percentage of families, it is so important to provide that foundation for the couple and the family, but also to ensure what they have built, not only together, but apart, benefits the children as well. And we're going to take a quick commercial break. I am going to come back with Abby, who is just off the charts, providing such amazing, amazing information. For those of you who really want to get in contact with Abigale Stolfe, she is the owner of JerseyCoastFamilyLaw.com. Definitely we're going to be providing her information so that you can get to her in New Jersey, so you can plan out what is in the best interest, not only for you in your next chapter, but your family. But we have one more segment with this amazing, empowering attorney. So tune back in right after this.